Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and record our sync signal onto track 4 of this tape. So we're going to use this device here, which is a YMC10 MIDI clock to tape sync or FSK generator. And I've got this hooked up to the output, the MIDI output of this device here, which is connected to Ableton. And then the output of this is then connected into channel 4 on the recorder. So when this device here receives MIDI clock generate this, in this case in Ableton, but this could be a drum machine, it could be a sequencer, what's going to happen is it's going to generate an audio signal, which is effectively a version of that clock encoded digitally, but as an audio signal, which then can be recorded onto this track of the tape. What that gives us is essentially a recording of the MIDI clock on the tape, so that now if we kind of do this properly, everything on that tape will be synchronized up to that MIDI clock, which means we can then run things like drum machines or sequencers, and in this case a laptop, but it could be a hardware sequencer, in time with any audio recordings that we've made on the other 3 channels of the tape. So what it sounds like to begin with before you send any MIDI clock is kind of this, and then when it starts receiving MIDI clock, as we'll hear in a second, it starts changing to this pulsing tone, which is what has the sync or the clock signal encoded into it. So I'm just going to turn this up a second and have a little listen what happens when I press play. So go over, hit label, and start generating some MIDI clock. And we can instantly hear this kind of pulsing FSK MIDI sync signal being generated. So in terms of recording it onto the tape, the manual says it should be around between 0 and plus 3 decibels, which yeah, that looks pretty good to me. It is kind of annoying, so we can turn that off for a second. So what we're going to do next is we're going to essentially stripe the tape with this, or record, bounce down this MIDI clock signal via the converter onto the tape. And at the same time that we're going to do that, we're also going to record 2 channels of audio from Ableton onto these 2 channels. And because we're playing this all from Ableton, the audio on Ableton will be synced up to the MIDI clock, and the MIDI clock will generate the FSK signal, which will also all be synced up to everything. So what we'll end up with is 2 tracks of audio here, and a synchronization signal here. All of these will be in sync with each other, which means that then we can use this tape recorder essentially as a master clock to control our sequencer, in this case Ableton, which will then send MIDI out to our drum machine, our bass synth, and we can have this audio all synced up nicely with a MIDI, which is a pretty neat kind of idea, I think. Before I jump into recording the audio down, just one thing I want to sort of show you on this. So it has 2 modes. It can take sync signal in and then convert that back out to MIDI clock, or it can take MIDI clock in and then convert that out to tape sync. And you switch between the modes using this switch. It's kind of laid out like a block diagram. So for this, we're going to put it into this mode, which takes MIDI clock in and then generates as a sync out. Just thought I'd better mention that before I got stuck in. Okay, now what I've got is I've got 2 channels of audio coming out from the audio converter here, played back from in Ableton, going into tracks 1 and 2. I've also got the MIDI clock going out from Ableton via MIDI into this, which is generating the clock signal going into channel 4. So it's quite an annoying sound that, but if I go ahead and hit play, you can hear the audio. You can hear the audio that I'm going to be working with on these 2 channels, and then you can also hear this on that channel. One thing I should mention before I get stuck into recording it in is why I'm using channel 4. The reason why I'm using channel 4 for the sync is simply because on this recorder there is a sync output here, which always connects the output of channel 4 to there, which means you can send the sync out whilst keeping this fader down during playback, which is obviously handy because otherwise all you'd hear would be that on your kind of mix out. So this gives me a dedicated output from this channel that I can use to fade down. The other way you could do it would be using an aux or a send, but this means you still have access to your sends. The other nice thing about this recorder as well, other than the dedicated sync channel, is that you can record on all 4 tracks simultaneously. So in the instruction manuals, they do kind of say that you should record the sync first and then do the other stuff, but I had to go at this the other night and it worked fine recording it all simultaneously. So in a second I'm going to hit play on this, and what we're going to get is all the audio I want to be recording out onto these 2 tracks, a sync signal here, and then that audio and that sync signal will be synchronized with each other for the purpose of syncing everything together. So just to kind of give you a flavor of it, I'm not going to have it too loud because obviously that is incredibly annoying. So I'm going to go ahead and turn down my main out actually. this mixer on me. Go ahead and turn down my main out over here just so I can get the gains good without deafening myself. That's pretty horrible. Bring this down a bit more. Oh, I just lost a photograph. So I'm going to set these guys to roughly the same, somewhere between 0 and 3. I find works quite well with this recorder. Not too much distortion. This guy's set on 0, bring him up a bit to just about there. So now we should be ready to have a pass at recording this. So if I go ahead and stop Ableton, go back to the beginning, and then we can get that recorded in. So here goes. I'm gonna let the tape go because I want to get it past the leader, so we're onto tape before I start recording. I'm also going to leave a little bit of the beep to begin with, just so there's somewhere for the tape to register to, or the MIDI to register to. Now we're getting playback, and here's the audio coming in now. Okay, so we now got the tape sync recorder on this track. We've got our kind of chord pad things recorded on these 2 tracks. This thing's been switched around, so it's now doing the conversion from the tape sync back to MIDI. So the signal's going out of here into here and then coming back out as MIDI, which is controlling or providing the clock for Ableton. Ableton set to the external sync, as you can see there. And Ableton is solely being used here as a MIDI sequencer. So it's got the drum tracks on, which are being fed into the RX5, and it's got the bass line, which is being fed into the DX21, which is going via this Boss Super Chorus, which is, I guess if you guys watch any of my videos, you know you probably know I really love this pedal. I've got it all hooked up over here to this mixer. We've got a little bit of reverb on Ascend using this MIDI verb up here, MIDI verb 2, which I think is a kind of criminally underrated effect. One thing I have done, which I didn't mention, is that I've left about a bar's gap here before the MIDI starts. Simply because I noticed that, and I think this is Ableton rather than the sync generator, if you start the MIDI off there, because that's when the bass line comes in here, if the bass line starts here, it's kind of slightly out of sync and then it pulls itself back into sync, like it kind of warps out, like it starts off a little bit out of sync and then warps itself in, which, to be honest, I think it's actually to do with how Ableton handles the sync signal and synchronizing itself. I've got a couple of bits of gear that do this. So I don't think that's actually to do with that, but that's the only reason why I've left a little gap here. The first time I tried this, which is over here on this tape, which I'll come back to in a bit, I noticed this and it was a bit annoying because obviously the bass comes in straight away. So this is kind of something I've done to alleviate that. From my experience, this whole setup's pretty stable. The only time I've had massive problems with the sync not working is when and this was me, I accidentally changed the pitch here, which stretched the tape out a bit, which then meant the sync wasn't being recognized. So I think it's quite sensitive to kind of the tape being a bit worn. This isn't a particularly new tape. It's been used quite, a reasonable amount, maybe 6-8 times before, maybe 10 max, but it's not brand new. It is Type 2, which is what this machine takes, and obviously high quality tapes. It does seem relatively stable, and what we're going to do next is I'm going to play this all back for you so you can hear what it sounds like. So I'm going to hit play on this, and then we're going to see Ableton start playing, which will then sequence these elements in time with the audio recorded on the tape, and then we're mixing it all through here. So yeah, I'll just pop this on to kind of record through the laptop so we can get good clean audio so you can have it here how it sounds via tape. Okay, here goes. Okay, so we've seen what it's like when it works. Let's have a look at a couple of things that can go wrong with it. So the first thing is that issue with it kind of taking a minute to kind of lock the sync in, which I do think is Ableton, but I'll come back to why I think that in a second. I'm just going to demonstrate on here. So I'm going to record the audio so you can hear it, and I'm also going to kind of show you the clock and you can see what's going on. Start off by hitting play on this tape, which is the version I prepared originally before I started recording the video, which is why I first noticed this issue. So it's most noticeable on this version because the MIDI starts at right at the beginning, so at beat 1 of bar 1. So there's no time for the clock to kind of get in sync before the MIDI starts. But you'll hear what I mean in a sec when I sort of hit play on the tape. So I think you can see and hear what I mean there. You can hear how the MIDI kind of sounds out of time with the audio that's playing off the tape. You can see how the MIDI clock moves around in and out of kind of being the right sync. I think this is to Ableton, and I think it's to do with the fact that it kind of assumes it's going to be 130, and then it isn't quite one, because that's the last tempo it was set to. But then it isn't quite 130, it's like slightly off. So I think it takes it a minute to kind of put itself back in time, which is why you hear that, which is why on the other version of this tape, the second one that I recorded earlier, showed you earlier, this one, you know, I left that bars gap at the beginning just to give it some time to settle down. I think maybe 2 bars is probably a better amount of time. As you can see there, it took a little while to settle down. This could be to do with the tape kind of stretching in and out, and the signal, the timing of the tape moving in and out and affecting the signal. I don't think it's that. I think it's, like I said, the issue with Ableton trying to match up the tempo. Also, it might be recorded into the original clock sync signal, in that I do find Ableton isn't the most stable MIDI clock, so it could be the actual MIDI clock that was generated by Ableton in the first place that was then recorded to the tape wasn't 100% stable to begin with. So that's one of the failures, or one of the issues I've noticed with it. The other issue that I've sort of come across is that if there's any dropouts in the tape, or if the tape gets slightly stretched, the device will kind of lose sync and then it won't start up again. So I'll demonstrate this by playing the same tape. This has got a bit of tape where it drops out, and I made that by accident when I was playing it back. I sort of changed the pitch, and I must have stretched the tape out or something, so it causes dropout. So I'll play that and I'll show you what I mean as well with that. So we're now going to look at the other thing that can go wrong with this. So if the signal drops out on the tape, or you know, for any reason, like the tape's become stretched out, or something like that, or there's, you know, just some issue with the tape, what happens is the sync just stops, and then obviously the slave devices like Ableton sequencer or whatever you're using, and will stop and it won't pick up. So this will happen in just a sec on this tape. So just wait for it to see there how the cursor stopped moving, it stopped playing even though the tape's still going. And the reason for that is because there's a kind of momentary dropout on that tape, which wasn't actually, you know, just because the tape's bad, or that this isn't a particularly stable or reliable recording system. I don't think that was actually my fault. I tried to adjust the pitch of the tape while it was playing, so I was kind of hoping you could do some interesting speeding up, slowing down MIDI clock things with it. But all that did was stretch the tape out, and so it doesn't work in that section, and that throws the whole thing off, which that would get very annoying because it's quite easy to get little bits of dropouts on tape, or bits where the volume's not quite where it should be for this to work, or indeed to be stretched a little bit, things like that, or the speed to kind of gradually increase, things like that, or gradually decrease for a few different reasons when you're using tape. So I imagine that's the kind of thing that would get annoying if you were using this kind of a lot for recording. So yeah, I just thought I'd kind of demonstrate that kind of failure as well. Yeah, so that was my experiments using the YMC10 to generate tape sync, and then using tape sync recorded on a tape to control Ableton sequences and all that sort of good stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you've got any questions or any observations, let me know in the comments, and I shall catch you on the next video. Hopefully do a few more of these style videos where I look at gear or do little tutorials. So like and subscribe if you can. Thanks folks.